Welcome to this important discussion on how recent executive orders issued by the Trump administration and Project 2025 will impact people of color. We are bringing the conversations you've been having at your dinner tables, workplace water coolers, and in your minds to this community forum. I'm Dr. L. Mackenzie Mack, a licensed psychologist in the state of Georgia and a member of both organizations hosting this event tonight, Top Ladies of Distinction North Atlanta chapter and the NAACP Gwinnett County branch partnered to ensure our communities are informed about and prepared to make decisions regarding social and political policies that impact their bank account, quality of life, and safety. Top Ladies of Distinction is a nonprofit humanitarian organization composed of women interested in the well being of their community and the preservation of values significant to wholesome living. The organization is focused on mentoring youth, enhancing the status of women, enriching the lives of senior citizens, and community beautification. It began in 1964, following a luncheon invitation by Lady Bird Johnson to fellow Texan Willie Lee Glass. The North Atlanta chapter was founded in 2018 and is currently under the leadership of Lady Leslie Williams. This program is brought to you by Lady Jennifer Jones, the chair of Top Ladies of Distinction North Atlanta chapter's NAACP Projects Committee. The National Association for the Advancement of Colored People is known as the NAACP and was founded in 1909 by W.E.B. Du Bois, Ida B. Wells, and other notable civil rights figures of various racial and ethnic heritages. This organization advocates for racial justice and equality. It uses litigation, advocacy, and agitation to achieve its aims. The NAACP is the oldest and largest civil rights organization in the United States. After I briefly introduce our moderator and speaker, the next voice you will hear will be that of our esteemed moderator, who will guide our conversation tonight. During this portion of the program, feel free to share your personal experiences, any data, opinions, or insights in the chat. Tonight's moderator is Dr. Stephanie Hodge, who is CEO and Principal Consultant for Essex Consulting LLC, a certified woman owned small business, providing human resource and business consulting for small and mid sized companies. She has over 25 years of global HR experience, leading teams in North America, Canada, and South America in the financial services, software technology, and nonprofit industries. Dr. Hodge is a certified senior professional in human resources, a faculty member for Georgia Center for Nonprofits, Nonprofit University, and a guest lecturer at Georgia State University. She's also an active member of the Atlanta Black Chambers, Cobb Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of African Americans in HR, and the Society for HR Management. She has been featured on Business Radio X and profiled in Voyage Atlanta. Dr. Hodge is very active in her community. She's a board member for Giving Health, a nonprofit organization committed to providing no cost telehealth solutions to individuals who lack access to affordable quality health care, and also a proud member of Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated and Top Ladies of Distinction North Atlanta chapter. Tonight's speaker is Edward Paul, who is president of the Gwinnett County branch of the NAACP. He's been a member of the branch since 2020 and initially served on the Political Action Committee, which helped with voter registration, poll monitoring, and door to door canvassing. He became chair of that committee in 2021 and later first vice president of the chapter. During his membership with the branch, he helped to restart the Legal Redress Committee by recruiting volunteers from surrounding law schools in metro Atlanta. In 2022, he directed the branch's largest to date Get Out the Vote campaign. In June of 2024, he was appointed by the NAACP National Office to serve as president of the Gwinnett County branch. That November, he was then elected by the general membership to continue in the role for a 2-year term. President Paul is focused on expanding the branch's impact and strengthening the branch's programming and advocacy efforts. Under his leadership, the Health and the ACTSO committees, and ACTSO stands for Afro Academic, Cultural, Technological, and Scientific Olympics, they've taken off. ACTSO empowers and uplifts youth by providing mentorship and opportunities to showcase their talents in STEM, the humanities, performing arts, and entrepreneurship. At present, ACTSO has reestablished an annual competition where students earn scholarships, awards, and national recognition. President Paul wants all to know that he is committed to advancing the NAACP's mission of justice, equity, and community empowerment in Gwinnett County and beyond. And now to our program.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, President Paul. Nice to see you.
Good to see you.
Let's jump right in. I want to make sure we all understand what is Project 2025 and who's behind it.
Oh, wow. So that's so Project 2025. Let me just start, I guess, with the genesis of this. So in 1971 of August, a former Supreme Court justice named Mr. Justice Powell created what he called a Powell referendum. What that was a document that basically said that there needed to be something done to take back the country. That's the gist of the Powell referendum. I'm leaving breadcrumbs for people to look up for themselves and read. So that was in 1971. Basically what it was like, hey, we need to form some type of think tank to push back against some of these more progressive policies that were gained during the assassination of Dr. King, Malcolm X, many of our Fred Hampton, many of our freedom fighters that was on the front line, and many others that put it on the line. John Lewis, who during that time with the March on Selma, all those different things that happened in the 60s, they wanted to put in a referendum to basically, in their mind, take back the country. Wow. What happened 10 years later, after that referendum was put out, you had an organization called the Heritage Foundation that was founded. That was founded, about 10 years later. They came up with what they called the Mandate for Leadership. The Mandate for Leadership was a document that was published in 1981, was given to Ronald Reagan. It was said in the current, what we call Project 2025, really is the Mandate for Leadership. In that document, 60% of the policy recommendations was implemented by the Reagan administration during the 1980s under his presidency. So the Project 2025 is been around for several years. Again, it's been around the Heritage Foundation. We've been in around since for about, this will be our 53rd anniversary coming up in April. The Heritage Foundation was founded 1 year after that Powell referendum. So it was founded in 1972. So again, 1971. Well, 72, because it was after the Powell referendum. So again, these organizations and entities been around for quite some time. Now, the money that's behind this current Mandate for Leadership, or what we call Project 2025, is Elon Musk, of course, who's the Doge, Peter Thiel, and you can look up a lot of these names, David Sachs, Roelof Botha, And Roelof Botha is one of the tech sort of giants he's the grandson of Roelof Pick Botha. So for those who know the international politics or maybe from South Africa, his father was the foreign minister of South Africa during apartheid, along with Elon Musk being a child of apartheid. So again, you're talking about a group of powerful, rich white men who seen how segregation works, seeing how to oppress a certain group of people, specifically us, who are the money behind it. Now, the architect behind this particular project, Kevin Roberts, who got his degree at the University of Texas, wrote his thesis on the Haitian Revolution, as well as apartheid in South Africa. So again, you have a group of men with both money and influence on this project that know very well how to, that study, deep study in terms of how to oppress a group of people, specifically us, whether it be in South Africa or in Haiti or here in the United States.
Wow. That says a lot. You know, when you think about that, how do you see, or how do you think this Project 2025 will aim to reshape government, reshape policy, and then impact our society? How do you see that coming to fruition?
Well, again, the goal is ultimately to privatize the government. So it's to destabilize the government, take away a lot of public services that we take for granted. Post office, Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, TANF, SNAP benefits, unemployment benefits, all these things that, are there to help us when we fall on hard times, things that we've been paying taxes on. Some of us that's been working like myself since 16 years old, we've been paying into that tax system. And when things happen, whether you lose your job, whether you get sick, whether you have some type of, health issue, these things were supposed to be a security blanket to protect us. So what you're seeing now is pretty much like I said at the Genesis with the Powell memorandum. They want to basically put the power in terms of all the gains we got in the 60s from FHA, from voting rights. They want to put it back in the hands of not just white people. There's a select group of white people, rich, wealthy, white. So, and that's the goal of this particular project. Black people fought for a lot of rights that not only we benefit from, but white people had poor and working class white people benefit from, specifically women. Hispanic brothers and sisters benefit from, Asian and Indian brothers benefit from, migrating here. So again, this project is to say no. We're in their mind taking the country back and putting it in the hands of rich white people, and they want to privatize all these different industries, which we know with privatization comes hypercapitalism and pretty much rolls over the little man, which is us.
That's right.
At the expense of keeping the uber wealthy even more wealthy.
Wow. You talked about all of the different groups that could be impacted. So let's drill down a little bit more and talk about our community, our schools. What are your concerns about how all of these changes we're seeing, how it may impact school curriculum, funding, or even support services due to these policies?
So from a funding perspective, it would take Congress to pass a law to affect K-12 funding. What will be impacted is the statistics. So with the dismantling of entities like the Department of Education, you lose that data in terms of being able to study the student achievement gap between, Black and brown students and white students. All that data kind of starts to get sort of scrubbed, and then they can say, well, hey, we don't need to give extra, funding for this or that
Yeah.
Because hey, I mean, there's no racism, that doesn't exist. Well, if you don't have any data to back it up to say that it still does, or there's still a problem, or these inequities needs to be addressed, then you can just say whatever you want to say. So I think that's where we have to look in terms of how it's going to affect the educational system. As far as the curriculum, again, I do think if the states, depending on what state you live in, and I'll specifically focus on Georgia tonight since that's where we're at, it's going to all depend on how the local level, out of fear of what the state apparatus, state being the state legislature, the Georgia Assembly, your state house, state representative, the governor, how they may, bow to Trump's will to say, hey, we're going to pull certain state funding, towards public education from the states if they teach this and that in terms of the curriculum. But as any teacher there's the curriculum and there's what you teach when you close that door behind you. So a great teacher, a good teacher that's got experience, they'll know how to still get the points through and speak our history. But again, without it, somebody getting in trouble. But at the end of the day, they are weaponizing certain groups or certain people within the school system to act as the police to report, hey, this teacher is teaching this and I don't like it, and things like that. So you do have to be aware of certain things like that. But like I said, once you close your door, it's your classroom and you're pretty much allowed to, teach how you want to teach at that point.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. What do you also feel like there could be some impact to access to scholarships and mentor programs, leadership opportunities, particularly for people of color?
I think if you are a nonprofit and you do some type of organizing around those things, it could impact you. As far as the Pell Grant itself, once again, you're talking about, money coming from the federal government. Again, that would take the act of Congress, because Congress, the House of Representatives, they hold the purse in terms of how the money is divvied up in terms of funding to the states. So unless you see Congress starting to push for a certain bill, specifically the House, and then of course it'll go to the Senate if it passes through the House, unless you start to see Congress to do some things like that. Right now, there's no alarm that need to be sound. The problem is, though, with the dismantling and the closing of all these Department of Education offices, if there is an issue and then they're moving the student loan from the Department of Education, I think, to the SBA, which is Small Business Administration, if you got a problem with your student loan, if there's an issue, if you negotiated during the Biden era to get lower payments and it's kind of been pending, some people are seeing their rates go up. And now that you got, all these people that's been laid off, it may take you 8-9 hours to try to get on the phone with somebody to figure out what you need to do next. So that's where you may see some of the problems. As far as, students being able to get and receive Pell Grants, for now, unless you see something passed through Congress, that should be okay. It's some of the people like myself and others who got student loan debt, like I said, may have been in limbo, still waiting for something to happen, or it may have just been in waiting. And now they're seeing, hey, I thought my student loan bill was going to be $220 or $200, and now it's $700 because they've beat back some of these Biden executive orders that was there to help lower student loans.
Wow. Okay. And we will talk about some action items, so it won't be so depressing.
Yeah,
we got to dig into this.
Because I think this, we shouldn't be depressed, and I'll get into why.
Right. I just want folks to hold on. When you originally shared with us what Project 2025 is and sort of the funding behind it, it makes me think about all we see in the news lately is Elon Musk and DOGE, or the Department of Government Efficiency. So what do you think is the ultimate goal of DOGE? What are they doing?
It's a grift. That's the easiest answer. But no, to get it a little more detailed, the department is designed, at least that's what they say, to find where the government has wasteful spending. It's not doing that. It's there to gather data to get our information, to make a lot of these agencies dysfunctional so that they can say, hey, look, the government sucks at their job, but you sabotaged the government. You did all these layoffs. You went in and took over all this data and you created all this chaos. You and your cronies, y'all are having group messages on Signal and whatever other conversations y'all having on Signal, and getting information is getting out there. Again, it's there to find our data, use our data, sell our data, and then and make the administrative state, whether it's Department of Education, whether it's HUD, whether it's Human Health and Human Services, is there to destabilize all these that's part of Project 2025. Stabilize those entities, put their people in place, so have all these mass layoffs. But again, even with that, they've bit off more than they can chew, because these are big, wide range agencies. So part of Project 2025 one of the legs of Project 2025 was to have a database full of a bunch of resumes, or when they have these mass layoffs, they can bring their people in to take up these jobs. Well, again, these entities are too big, too wide, too many people with experience to just bring people off the street that are just prepared to step in and sort of be your tools of chaos to be disruptive. So, but the ultimate goal, like I said, of DOGE is to, destabilize these entities so that they can say, hey, these entities need to be ran by XYZ, name whatever corporation that you want to name. Wells Fargo, since I heard they trying to take over, I think, the post office or something. Bank of America. Name whatever huge institution that is out there. Transition those entities into those institutions in an effort to privatize those industries, which, once again, we know once corporations step in, is for them, everything is about profit. And these entities are designed to turn a profit. These entities are designed to be a public good that's there, like I said, for when, we fall on hard times, to be sort of a floor for people to not just end up being, uberly poor, to the point that leads to high crime, because we know crime is tied to, people not having enough to satisfy their basic need, which is food and shelter.
Right. So, you talked about these big corporations and the cost cutting measures, and you touched on it a little bit with the crime, but what do you think the broader social implications will be as they start to streamline and cut down on these programs? What's going to happen with society, our broader social implication?
Well, I think what you'll start to see, like I said, I think it's going to be challenging for them to get their way, because organizations like ours and yours and many others will be pushing back. But if they were to implement, their dream of privatizing these entities, I think what you're going to see is similar to what you saw in the 80s, where, you had a lot of people that was poor, a lot of people standing in line, for food. And even again, with them destabilizing what they're doing with the Department of Agriculture and some of the other different departments that was tied to getting food from these farmers to these different food banks, even those places going to have a hard time keeping up with that, because again, those entities are, those things have been defunded. So once again, I just think, you'll have a society of chaos, which is why you're seeing, a lot of the Republican side of our government, or the Republican candidates that's been having town halls in places even like Georgia. They're not having town halls because even they voters are upset. What's going on? Because, I'm sure in their mind they thought a lot of these things would just affect us. Let's just keep it real. That's, again, there's a reason why, those people voted for Trump, because they believe he would implement those things, but they didn't believe them not understanding that, like I said, Project 2025 is a white, rich, elite document for rich white people. And so when they said they're going to take back their country, they're not just talking about taking it back from Black and brown and Asian and Indian people, but also middle class and working class white people too, because again, as I stated earlier, there hasn't been any policies that Black people have fought for where we was the only ones that exclusively benefited. Everybody benefited from us fighting to have a floor under us in this country economically, civically, and socially. So everybody benefited from that. There has not been any exclusive policies where we were the only ones that benefited. So I think they're finding out in real time that the class collaboration that they've had with rich white elite people over the 500 plus 400 plus years that we've been in this country, that once again they're also getting hurt by a lot of these bad policies.
It's a surprise for them.
Oh yeah, they're finding out in real time. They're finding out in real time, and they're going to continue to find out in real time. And I'm very curious to see what the midterms look like in 2026. And how that response is to that, to them find out, because we only, what is this, month number 4 into this administration, and it feels like it's
not
already
year 4. What?
Yeah, exactly. So we still got a long ways to go.
Right. We didn't talk about this yet. The World Health Organization. So what we're seeing is the U.S. withdrawing from the World Health Organization. How do you think that is going to impact, particularly our community, both our community nationally and globally? How do you think that's going to impact?
Well, I think it's going to be problematic for any diseases that are similar to COVID or measles. I think what's going to happen is you lose that intellectual thrust that was all that funding, all that intellectual thrust that you had that was studying these different diseases and having methods and mechanisms in place to fight against it. Again, people forget during COVID, former President Barack Obama had a team in place that Trump got rid of after he was sworn in to be sort of like a disease response team for things like COVID. Of course, COVID got as bad as it did because that response team is not there. So I think with our withdrawal from WHO, it opens us up for, again, another pandemic. And I hate to say it, but only thing we can do is pray that one doesn't happen within the next 4 years. But we are wide open for another mass pandemic and probably another government shutdown at some point, because we don't have. Again, the CDC has been defunded, it has been downsized. So now you lose all those people that was doing those studies, getting that research on how to protect ourselves. Now that those people not in place, if something were to happen, who do you have in place to respond to these diseases? Who do you have in place to give advice and say, hey, this is what we need to do? Who do you have in place to come up with the vaccinations for these diseases, or to keep track of that data and let us know, hey, we need to watch this particular disease in this particular state. So I think it just opens us up for another government shutdown due to another pandemic within the next 4 years. I mean, I know people may not want to hear that, but that is very highly likely now that we've withdrawn ourselves from the World Health Organization.
Okay, we said not scary, but what could be some other policies or programs that could go into place without WHO collaboration? What else could we do?
I mean, the state could step in and create some entities that can sort of be a firewall to kind of sure up some of the infrastructure that is going to be left behind from organizations like the CDC being defunded. But ultimately, the state, they only can do so much. Most southern states depend on federal dollars to get by. Georgia is no different. Places like Mississippi, Alabama they would be in the red without federal funding. So at the end of the day, could it be it's a Band-Aid over a gunshot wound? The state can step in and do some things, but again, the state has other things that it's responsible for. The reason we have a federal apparatus is because the federal government can print money. That's why when people say things like the federal, the government needs to be run like a business. The federal government is not a business. You don't run it like a business. A business is there to make profit. The federal government is there to be a public entity, public service entity that, hey, when everything else fails, when different things in society fail, no problem. We can print money.
Right.
Step in and sure up. I mean, again, when you had the financial crisis back in 2008, who bailed out the banks? Who saved the banks? It was the federal government.
Yeah.
Now, again, we're talking about rich, elite white people, and we're okay, some of us at least in society, with us bailing out banks, but we're not okay with protecting the American people. This is what the federal government is for. This is why it exists. So the state can step in and maybe create a budget to try to, create a state version of, funding the CDC or funding some version of the CDC to step in to study these things. But again, those funds only go so far because, most states like Georgia have a very low state income tax. Some states don't even have an income tax. But again, they also have other budgets and things they need to budget. So ultimately, you're going to need the federal government to step back up to get back in the game to fix this problem long term.
Okay. I'm hearing some implications to how we vote that I'm sure you'll cover shortly.
Right.
So as we kind of wrap up our discussion, I just have a couple more questions. What I'm really curious, President Paul, what are some potential long-term consequences of all these policies to racial and gender equity? So we talked about financial implications and the disparity. But what about racial and gender? Do you see any long-term implications there or consequences?
I think it exasperates those already inequities. So there's already inequities with gender. There's already inequities in this country with race. Project 2025, if continue to be implemented and we don't continue to go to court and fight, it exasperates that. Now, again, I look at the situation here in Georgia. We had two young men who mysteriously lives was taken. GBI is investigating. So let's play that scenario out. Let's say, and again, nothing's came publicly. So this is just me using a hypothetical here, but let's just say there was foul play. Let's say this was racially motivated. Well, let's GBI, rules it that way. There's no federal apparatus that would typically step in like what we had with a Kristen Clark under President Joe Biden to step in and take over that case and be a firewall. So again, you don't have that federal protection from, people doing something to us racially. You don't have that protection from entities like the FHA or entities like the EEOC, if you're being discriminated against, by a certain employer. You don't have anybody to step in HUD that you can file a complaint if you feel like you're being discriminated against to buy a house. So now that this federal apparatus has been taken over by the architects and the money of Project, and again, people don't need to tie MAGA and Project to just Donald Trump. As I just stated, the Heritage Foundation been around just as long as we have at NAACP. They've been around over 50 plus years. So this is not Trump is just a signing pen. He's just a puppet. The people that's behind Project 2025, and people can look this up. They called them, I think New York Magazine called them the MAGA moguls, the Elon Musk, the Peter Thiels, the David Sachs, the Rollout Botha. These are the people, the Kevin Roberts. These are the brains and the money that's behind Project. So even when Trump's gone, these people still going to be around because they got all this wealth and all this money and influence that's going to still be implementing Project 2026 and Project 2027 and Project 2028. So saying, to put a bow on that, the implications of all of this is going to be it's going to exasperate these things, and I guess we're gonna at some point we'll get to what we need to do, because that's what we'll need to do.
That's my next question. President Paul, thank you so much, because we've all been informed here. I know I've learned a lot in just this little bit of time, but now what actions can we take? What can we do to mitigate some of the impact of these policies and changes? What can we do?
So before I jump to that, I'm gonna get to a couple of things that I miss, not covering. So First thing is, people need to understand they invested $22 million into creating Project 2025, or this version of Project 2025. This mandate for leadership. Again, we call it 2025 because that's the year it was going to be implemented. But mandate for leadership is the official name, and like I said, they've been doing that for years. The Heritage Foundation over the last 54 years has raised $106 million in revenue up to this point. So again, when I say this is not just about Donald Trump, this $106 million over the last year, this is a entity or an organization that's still going to exist long after Donald Trump is dead and gone. So what do? We have to be organized. We have to join organizations like Top Later Distinction, Gwinnett NAACP, United Ebony Society, League of Women Voters, Black Voters Matter. I mean, name whatever organization you want to name. Individuals, as Dr. Clark would say, does not beat institutions. We have to be part of some organization that's organizing around these social, civil rights, and human rights issues. The time to be on the sideline, I mean, that's over. I think the gloves are off in terms of, the white elites versus everybody else. And when I say everybody else, I'm not just talking about Black people. It's working class white people, there's Hispanic people, this is Asian people. The gloves are off. These people are coming for everything. They're looking to dismantle all these different entities in an effort to privatize Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, because they're looking to steal. They looking to take over these entities, not to be a public service good, to be a firewall when you fall on hard times. They're looking to see how can we squeeze every last dollar out of these things in an effort to keep lining our pockets. And the people that's going to suffer is going to be us. So we have to be organized. We have to join organizations where we can have some pushback and fight back against some of these things that are being implemented.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. I so appreciate your transparency and helping us. And I know that we must have a lot of questions. So I want to allow an opportunity for you to address some of the questions that we've received. So we'll transition now into our Q&A session, but thank you so much for answering my questions.
Absolutely.
Indeed. Thank you so much, President Paul, for this interesting conversation. As Dr. Hodge mentioned, let's now take it to the comments to hear what the audience wants to know. Regina Tatum has a question about jobs losing funding. She's wanting to know, when do you think we will see the changes? So perhaps this is beyond the federal government, because we know federal government has already made lots of cuts of jobs. But when might others who are not federal employees see the changes in their communities and homes?
Let me see. I'm trying to find, where's her question? Okay. And jobs.
It's now on the screen.
Okay. And jobs could lose funding. If not, when do you think we'll see? Now, if she's referring to other entities that are not federal jobs, that are like private industries, again, as you see more and more tariffs being passed, again, tariffs is nothing but taxes on the consumer. When the consumer is being overly taxed, they're going to stop buying certain products. So again, depending on what industry you're in, as some of these union people that working for like the steel companies and industries like that are starting to see, you're going to see massive layoffs as corporations, money, depending on, like I said, what part of the entity you're in, as you see more and more tariffs being put on certain countries. And what I would recommend, wherever you work, see what countries do your job have dealings with, what countries, because if those are countries that, the current felon in chief are targeting, and I'm saying that, ain't nobody else saying that, I take the hit for that. The current felon in chief is targeting or being a signing pin to target, that could affect your job. So I would say do a little research on, what countries whether you work for Comcast, NBC, Coca-Cola, I'm trying to think of some companies that are in Georgia Power. See what international countries that your companies do have dealings with, and if you see tariffs are going at those particular countries, then yeah, that could affect your job, because if it's costing them more money to do business and buy certain products and things from those countries, then the first thing any corporation is going to do to get overhead down is get rid of employees, because that's the fastest way to show a profit or show a quick bottom line, because not only are you cutting out the salaries, you're cutting out the vacation, you're cutting out any health benefits that you're providing to that employee. So it's easier to lay people off to save money than it is to do anything else, or to, they're not going to cut their bonuses and anything like that down. So you're going to be on the chopping block.
Thank you. Our next question is also from Regina Tatum. She is also asking, have you seen any schools or universities impacted by the Trump administration, stating that if they will use race for scholarships, they could possibly lose funding?
So with that, again, schools won't be targeted to lose federal funding unless it's an act of Congress. Trump can say that, he can pass whatever executive order to say that, but Congress controls the purse, specifically the House of Representatives. So unless there's a bill passed by the House, then signed by the Senate, and then goes to Trump desk to actually do that, which we will fight in court. I can say that. I'm confident our national office will be fighting that in court if that was the case. Yeah, you don't have to be concerned with the funding. Like I said, the biggest thing the schools need to be worried about is the data. That's what's going to be a detriment, because now you can't see these disparities, and there's no entity to keep up with these disparities as they're happening in terms of reading and math and things like that.
Okay. We have quite a few more questions in the comments. This next question comes from Juneteenth NYC. What does it mean when we hear the US dollar is losing its value, and how does that affect the average Black household?
So if the US dollar is losing its value, that means when we shop or buy goods abroad, it's going to be more expensive. How does it affect the average Black household? Well, again, like I said, it just depends. If we're talking about economics in terms of jobs, depending on what job you're in, if it's costing your employer to spend more money to buy supplies and things like that, that could lead to a lot of layoffs. Individually, it just depends if you are an entrepreneur and you depend on buying certain things from overseas because you have some type of relationship where you get certain things at a much lower price. It could cost you more as an entrepreneur, and you may have to raise prices on things and services you sell, which may hurt you, as an entrepreneur, because again, as prices go up, that may scare off your customer base, and they may not want to, pay that extra $2, $3, $4, $5 for your particular product. So I think it just really depends on, where you're at in terms of whether you're talking about as an employee or as an entrepreneur, how it will affect us. But as the dollar continues to lose its value, it's going to be, like I said, more expensive for us to do business abroad or buy things that would be typically be purchased abroad. Whereas right now, most of the time when we go to these other countries, the dollar is normally more valuable than the currency in that particular country. A lot of those things are a lot less. Well, now when you take those trips to Dubai or, name whatever, paradise place people like to go to in Mexico or the Bahamas or places like that, it's going to cost you a lot more money to go down there and have a good time.
Okay. Our next question is also from Juneteenth NYC. How can we build community wealth together in this shifting economy?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, we have to be organized. And organized does not only mean being part of an organization, but that does mean, supporting Black businesses. One of the things that segregation did for the Black community, it trapped a lot of our Black elite in the same communities with a lot of our poor, middle class, and working class Black people. And so you had no choice but to support each other because you couldn't go outside of that apparatus. So I think, we have to get back to that mainly for two reasons. One, we have to, as Malcolm said, be self-determining. We have to have self-determination. We shouldn't have to depend on outside dollars to support ourselves. So I think, having a apparatus where we're supporting each other, we're supporting our businesses. We have, again, they can do what they want with the school system. If the state starts passing bills to take certain curriculum out of the school systems, but we need to have spaces where we can still teach our kids, where we can still have our kids learn. And we need to financially support people that's doing that work to create that space because, you need money, to make things go. And so, again, the whole purpose of having those spaces is to support each other so we can be self-sustaining. And so in order to do that, I think, to answer the question, how can we build community wealth? Not only do we got to turn inward within ourselves domestically, but, we need to look at it more of a global thing as well. We need to be forming relationships with our kin in the Caribbean, our kin, on the continent. We need to be making, those of us who got a little money that can go to those places and travel to those places. Don't just go there to vacation, go there to form business relationships and meet other people that's like-minded like yourself and form those relationships. Study what those countries, where do they have gaps at in terms of things that they need that you can provide as an entrepreneur, as a business person, and create that wealth. I think overall, to fight back against what we're seeing with Project 2025, I think the mindset is we have to create a global Africa, a global Pan-Africanist mindset in terms of our organizers. Our organizers need to be changing policies both here at home domestically, but also still understanding how certain policies can be affecting our kin internationally. And like I said, forming those relationships. Gwinnett is very unique, not only in its diversity in terms of, Asians, Hispanics, community here in Gwinnett County, but we have a lot of people from the diaspora from the continent that live in Gwinnett. So you got a lot of African-American, not only African-American, a lot of people from the continent, a lot of people from the Caribbean. So all of those people, we're one big melting pot of not only different races, but we're one big melting pot of Africana, of Blackness. So we have to lean into that, not only here on these shores in the United States, but we have to lean into that globally, because at the end of the day, white supremacy is global. Like I said, two of the people that's backing his money, they from South Africa, and they study how we was being oppressed in South Africa, and they taking that blueprint and saying, okay, this is how we're going to implement that blueprint here in the United States. So we can't look at our fight as just a domestic fight. This is a global fight, and we have to think globally. We have to support each other globally in an effort to sustain, like I said, to sustain ourselves, where we don't have to depend on if certain things go away, if they pull the funding over here because we being, okay, that's fine. You pull the funding, that was extra money anyway. I got my cousin who we already got a business partnership internationally that we working together anyway. And people in South Africa or Nigeria or in Venezuela or Brazil, I got, businesses that I set up all over that we supporting each other. And I'm taking the money that we're getting from those communities and supporting those communities, and also organizing in the United States to make sure those governments aren't being oppressed.
Well, that being said, that's fine. That's fine. With that being said, and as we pull up the next question, just to piggyback on what you've just discussed, give us your thoughts on bartering within our community and how that might be helpful to our community.
Now, when you say bartering, what do you mean in terms of
bartering services, exchange of services?
Yeah, I mean, again, we need to utilize every tool in the toolbox right now to fight back against this oppressive system. So whether that's bartering, whether that's, like I said, I know everybody want to be their own boss, but sometimes we need to combine these businesses. You may have better skills in marketing, and I may have better skills in just pure being able to grow customers. We need to, combine our businesses versus having two separate businesses. So I think, there's, at this point, we shouldn't leave anything undone. Voting is another one. We haven't touched on that now, but again, the reason we're in this predicament is because Georgia went from a 60% Black voter turnout in 2020 down to 58% in 2024. Vice President Harris only lost by 117,000 votes. Had only 1% of that 2% that we was down showed up to vote or showed back up to vote, we wouldn't be having this conversation. So once again, we need to, there's, like I said, we shouldn't leave any stone unturned in terms of our liberation. We need to organize more importantly than anything. We have to be organized because we have to know what are the issues, how do we attack the issues, and how do we move as a collective. But then again, we need to use protests. We need to use voting. We need to use bartering. we need to use, hey, let's collaborate and form, take my business, take your business. Let's make one big business. At this point, we need to put the egos aside and work together. Not only amongst ourselves, first starting with ourselves. Let me say that first starting with ourselves, because we can't work with each other. We can't work with other groups. So we need to be able to work with ourselves, and then we can organize and collaborate with other groups who going to push back against this sort of hyper capitalistic Project 2025 that's happening right now.
Thank you. Let's see if we can squeeze in a couple more questions. This next question is from Lady Jennifer Jones. Do the numerous executive orders have power alone, or do they have to be voted on by Congress?
So executive orders are orders that the president is trying to use, by, his sign and pen. They don't need an act of Congress to, well, put it like this. Some of them, in order to actually be law, would need Congress. It just depending on what is the executive order? How is it being written? Again, like I said, Trump is a signing pen, and a lot of these people, they have a lot of money, but they're not clearly as smart as they think they are, because a lot of these executive orders are going to get shut down in court. So, but to answer the initial question, depending on how the executive order is written and whether it violates certain parts of the Constitution, it could be shut down and challenged in court and say, hey, the only way this can go through is through an act of Congress. So it really just depends on what the executive order is and what's the intent of the executive order to be implemented. I would say a lot of the ones that Trump is doing, that especially targeting funding, those things have to go through Congress, because as I stated before, the House of Representatives, they control the purse. So they control the money. And so anytime you start talking about money being cut off or stopped, most of the time it does require Congress to pass a bill for that to get done. And again, we got some biggie, 2026, all the congressional seats will be up. So if people are upset with what's going on, then, that's a big year that we're going to have to get out and vote, as well as a third of the United States Senate will be on the ballot, including one here in Georgia.
I'm going to piggyback from what you just said. I'm going to go down to the big stills question, which is asking, when Democrats nor Republicans are offering any tangibles, why should we freely give our vote away? Would you please speak to that?
Well, I don't know what he means by one is not giving tangibles. I think the Democratic Party clearly laid out a list of tangibles. I mean, I think the Harris campaign had an entire document of tangibles. So, yeah, we would have to have a real conversation. Come on live, or you can come to an NAACP meeting. We can have that conversation. And again, this is not me caping for any political party, because we're nonpartisan. But at the end of the day, we have to be serious about having this a real conversation. Project 2025, like I said, is a white elitist document. That doesn't mean there are any elites in the Democratic Party, because there certainly are. But throughout the history of this country, as far as a class struggle, white people have chosen culture over partnering with other non-white groups to have a class struggle. So what do I mean by that? We go back to Reconstruction, when Black people first assumed power as state representatives, state senators in the 1800s. It was the working class white people that cut a deal with the rich elite white people to say we was being lazy, to lynch or try to make attempts to lynch representatives in the state house and state senate, all the while us as African people came out of enslavement. The first thing we did was start the first public school system in this country history, because at that time, poor white people didn't believe, they believed, public school or school was for rich kids, rich white kids. That wasn't anything. They wanted their kids out working on the farm. So again, all these gains, all these things we fought for and we helped create, always, like I said, not only benefited us, it benefited all groups. The biggest beneficiary of affirmative action was white women. Again, I was listening to some people talk the other day how a lot of white businessmen open up businesses under their wife's name in order to get certain grants and funding for these businesses because they want to take advantage of affirmative action. So there hasn't been anything that we as a people have gotten exclusively that didn't benefit the masses of people. But we also have to be serious. And when I say, we have to, as a people be organized, because there's some white nationalism within the Democratic Party that has to be dealt with as well, especially when, once again, you have these underlining tones anytime, Black candidates are running for statewide or nationwide office, and the conversation is to try to chase, instead of maximizing Black voter turnout and brown voter turnout, they're still trying to chase this conservative white voter who's, once again, is never going to vote with them because they're not voting about economics. They're not voting about expanding healthcare. Their vote is about culture. And what do I mean by that? I mean, they're voting on the aspiration of we are better than all these other groups. And we like that rhetoric that you're saying. Now they're going to attach certain economic sensibilities to a Donald Trump, for instance. So they're going to attach, hey, he's going to do some things for us. And no, did you read Project 2025? That ain't nothing about you unless you Peter Thiel or Elon Musk got money. Unless you got money like them, that ain't got. But they're going to attach those economic sensibilities because Trump is appealing to whiteness. He's appealing to the racism. He's appealing to take my country back. He's appealing to, these people are the reason that you don't have no health care, or your job's been sent overseas. No, the reason all these things is happening is because of capitalism and because rich white elites have been getting uber wealthy off of pitting you against us in the effort to keep stealing out of your pocket. So again, even white Democrats have to have a real conversation about that. If you're not going to deal with the fact that culture has been weaponized with people that support the Republican Party in an effort to steal, then we can't have a real conversation about what we need to do to get out of this mess. Now that's dealing with that side. As far as us and what we need to do, our focus needs to be on continuing to organize because our goal is we need to put our best opponent in office. So whether that's Democrat or Republican, whoever's going to be the party that we push or we lean on them or we agitate them, they're going to get resources for us. That's the party or that's the elected official that we need to put in office. So we have to pay very close attention to what people's political ideologies are. Like I said, we nonpartisan, so I'm not telling you vote Democrat or Republican. Sometimes the best candidate could be a Republican, depending on what their idea, or somebody that may be quote unquote conservative, depending on what their ideology is and what they're saying they're going to do if they get elected in office. But you have to be organized to understand, okay, what are the things we even need to ask for? What are the type of questions we need to flesh out with this candidate that's running for whatever said position that is. So that's why I say it's very important. We can't operate as individuals. We have to be an organization so we can have some of the conversation like this gentleman is raising about tangibles. So we can, again, come join my organization. Let's have a conversation, or just come into a meeting and let's have a conversation.
This will be continued for sure, but for right now, if we could squeeze in one more question, President Paul, audience member Juneteenth NYC is asking, how can faith-based organizations and cultural groups help protect and mobilize the community around these threats that you've discussed in this hour?
Yeah, I think as far as the faith-based groups is concerned, what they can do is partner with organizations like ours and others to get the congregation involved. When we have events like the one we're doing tonight to educate people on Project 2025, how it came, where it came from, things of that nature, it's good for them to partner with us to get that message out. Hey, NAACP is having a health forum to discuss health. NAACP is having a civic education forum, or Top Ladies of Distinction is having a candidate forum to talk to the different candidates running for political office. So I think the way the faith-based groups can get involved is to partner with our organizations and get communication out to their congregation when we're having these important discussions, so people can be educated on these topics. So that to me is how they can play a part in this, and also give us a microphone to when we have live events. I know this one is virtual, but when we have live events, give us some space to come and talk to the congregation and have these deeper conversations.
Thank you. Thank you, President Edward Paul, President of the Gwinnett County branch of the NAACP, for providing us this enlightening conversation, which was moderated by Dr. Hodge, Dr. Stephanie Hodge, and brought to you by Gwinnett County NAACP and Top Ladies of Distinction North Atlanta chapter. We have learned today more about DOGE and Project 2025. President Paul described them as folks who excel in oppression and tools of chaos, and with their efforts being aimed at privatizing industries that feed hypercapitalism. And one consequence of that, unfortunately, will be to undermine the access and upward mobility of groups of people that look like us. So please join your Gwinnett County NAACP. If you're not in Gwinnett County, join other social justice organizations like Top Ladies of Distinction. Both organizations have chapters in many cities. Join them or others like them. Become a part of the conversation. Become a part of the solution for addressing more atrocities to come and impact our communities. Thank you so much, President Paul. Dr. Hodge, Top Ladies of Distinction, and NAACP Gwinnett County branches.
All right. Thank you all. Before we wrap up, I just want to make a couple of quick announcements real quick. So we do have on April 10th our Founders Day event at 7:00 at the Gwinnett Justice and Administration Building. So that'll be April the 10th, Thursday at 7 p.m. We'll be celebrating 53 years in Gwinnett County. May 17th, we're going to celebrate 100 years of Malcolm. It'll be our Malcolm X event. It'll be between 1:30 and 3:30 at Bogan Park Activity Center. Of course, Juneteenth. We'll be doing Juneteenth at Rose Jordan Park. Both the Juneteenth and Malcolm X event will be in partnership with the Panhandle and the United Ebonist Society. And then September 20th, it'll be our Freedom Fund banquet. So, wear your best dresses, your best tux to that banquet. We'll have tickets that'll be on sale, hopefully before the end of the month. And I will say to Gwinnett County, if we get the speaker that I'm angling for us to try to get, y'all going to be competing with all of Metro Atlanta for them tickets. And no, it is not Barack Obama or Michelle Obama. We ain't got money like that to get them here. But it will be a powerful speaker that most people I think do know. He is a familiar face, and if you don't know him, once you type his name in YouTube or Google, and I will say it is a him, that's the only thing I'll say, you'll find who he is. So hopefully he's available to be on, and we'll see. I'll let you know. If you're a member of our branch, you'll have a 1 week head start to get your tickets before we make that public once it's out there. But that'll be September 20th. It'll be our Freedom Fund banquet, and that will be at the Beaufort Community Center. And that's all. So thank you all for coming. Y'all have a great night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.